The third shot echoed across the training ground with the same thunderous boom as the previous two. Sarah held her position, scope trained on the distant target, waiting for confirmation that seemed to take an eternity. The gathered crowd of soldiers stood in complete silence, understanding they were witnessing something extraordinary. Target hit. 3 for 3 confirmed. New base record established at 3,200 meters. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. In her military career, hardened veterans who had initially doubted her abilities were now shaking her hand and patting her back with genuine respect. But Sarah remained focused and humble, quickly securing her weapon and beginning the methodical process of cleaning and storing the Barrett 50. Word of the achievement spread through the base with incredible speed. Within hours, Sarah found herself called to Colonel Morrison's office, where she expected a brief congratulations and perhaps some paperwork to document the record. Instead, she found herself facing not just the colonel, but also Major Patricia Williams from the base's public affairs office. "Sergeant Martinez," Colonel Morrison began, "what you accomplished today is remarkable. In my 25 years of military service, I've never witnessed marksmanship of this caliber. The Army is going to want to recognize this achievement properly." Major Williams leaned forward in her chair. "Sarah, this kind of accomplishment doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are going to be questions about your training, your background, your methods. The media will be interested. Are you prepared for that level of attention?" Sarah had never considered the possibility that her shooting would attract attention beyond her immediate unit. She had always focused on being the best soldier she could be, not on gaining recognition. The idea of media interviews and public attention made her uncomfortable, but she understood it was part of the responsibility that came with her achievement. Over the following weeks, Sarah's life changed dramatically. The official documentation of her 3 200-meter shots went through proper military channels, with ballistics experts verifying every aspect of the achievement. High-speed cameras had recorded the shots and radar systems had tracked the bullet trajectories. There was no question about the validity of her accomplishment. The base's armorer, Sergeant First Class Robert Chen, became fascinated with Sarah's technique. He had been maintaining and customizing sniper rifles for over a decade, but he had never worked with someone who could consistently achieve such extreme accuracy. He began studying her equipment preferences, her ammunition selection, and her shooting positions. "Most snipers at this level have some kind of unique approach," Chen explained to Sarah during one of their sessions. "Some prefer specific ammunition loads, others modify their equipment in subtle ways. But you seem to succeed with standard military equipment and standard procedures. That makes what you do even more impressive." Sarah appreciated Chen's interest, but she had always believed that equipment was only as good as the person using it. Her success came from countless hours of practice, meticulous attention to detail, and an almost obsessive focus on understanding ballistics and environmental factors. The Army's marksmanship unit took notice of Sarah's achievement and sent an instructor to evaluate her technique. Master Sergeant David Rodriguez had trained some of the military's best snipers and had seen plenty of soldiers who could shoot well under controlled conditions but struggled in real-world situations. "Shooting at a known distance on a calm day, with perfect conditions, is one thing," Rodriguez told Sarah. "Combat shooting is entirely different. Targets move, conditions change rapidly, and there's no time for extensive calculations." To test Sarah's adaptability, Rodriguez designed a series of increasingly challenging scenarios. Unknown distances, moving targets, adverse weather conditions, and time pressure were all incorporated into her training. Sarah approached each challenge with the same methodical precision that had made her successful at extreme range. During one exercise, Rodriguez had Sarah engage multiple targets at various distances in rapid succession. The scenario simulated a combat situation where enemy positions had been identified, but immediate engagement was required to protect friendly forces. Sarah's performance was flawless, transitioning between targets and making accurate shots under pressure. "I've trained hundreds of snipers," Rodriguez told Colonel Morrison after observing Sarah's training. "She's not just an exceptional marksman. She has the mental discipline and tactical understanding to be effective in any situation." This soldier could be valuable in specialized operations. As word of Sarah's abilities spread through military channels, she began receiving inquiries from various special operations units. The possibility of assignment to more challenging and sensitive missions became increasingly likely. But Sarah remained focused on her current duties and continued training, understanding that reputation had to be backed up by consistent performance. Her fellow soldiers' attitudes toward her evolved as well. Initial skepticism had given way to respect, and respect had developed into genuine camaraderie. Sarah had proven that she belonged among the military's elite marksmen, and her gender had become irrelevant to her peers. The base's training programs were modified to incorporate some of Sarah's techniques. Her approach to environmental analysis, her breathing methods, and her equipment maintenance procedures became part of the standard curriculum for advanced marksmanship training. During this period of increased attention and responsibility, Sarah received a letter from her grandfather. He had heard about her achievement through family connections and wanted to share his pride in her accomplishment. His letter reminded her of the fundamental principles he had taught her as a child: respect for the weapon, dedication to improvement, and understanding that with great skill came great responsibility. Every shot fired in anger should be a shot that protects the innocent and serves a just cause, his letter concluded. I know you understand this, and I'm proud to see my granddaughter carrying on a tradition of service with such distinction. Sarah kept the letter in her personal gear, reading it whenever she felt overwhelmed by the attention and expectations that had followed her record-breaking achievement. It served as a reminder of why she had chosen military service and what her abilities were ultimately meant to accomplish. As her training intensified and her reputation grew, Sarah began to understand that her 3 200-meter shots had been more than just a personal achievement. They had opened doors to opportunities she had never imagined and responsibilities she was still learning to accept. The quiet soldier from Texas was becoming someone that the entire military was watching with interest. The stage was being set for challenges that would test not just her marksmanship skills, but her character, her judgment, and her commitment to the values that had guided her throughout her military career. 3 months after her record-breaking achievement, Sarah received orders that would change the trajectory of her military career. She was being transferred to a joint training facility where elite units from different branches of the military came together for specialized operations training. The facility was classified, and even her family would only know that she had been assigned to advanced training duties. The joint facility was unlike any military installation Sarah had previously experienced. The soldiers there represented the best of the best from Army Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Marine Force Reconnaissance, and Air Force Special Operations. Competition was fierce, and every individual had earned their place through exceptional performance in their respective specialties. Sarah's arrival was met with curiosity and some skepticism. Word of her 3,200-meter shots had preceded her, but many of the Special Operations veterans had never worked with female snipers in their units. They were willing to reserve judgment, but she would have to prove herself all over again in this new environment. Captain Michael Torres, a Green Beret with multiple combat deployments, was assigned as Sarah's initial training supervisor. He had requested the assignment specifically because he wanted to evaluate whether the reports about her abilities were accurate or exaggerated. Sergeant Martinez, Torres told her during their first meeting, everything you've accomplished to this point has been in controlled training environments. Here we focus on real-world applications under the most challenging conditions possible. Are you ready for that level of intensity? Sarah had expected this kind of reception. She understood that her gender and relative youth made some people question her capabilities regardless of her proven performance. Her response was simple. I'm ready to train hard and contribute to the mission, sir. The training scenarios at the joint facility were unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Night operations with limited visibility, shots taken from unstable platforms like helicopters, engagements in urban environments with civilian considerations, and missions requiring movement across hostile terrain while maintaining precision shooting capability. During her first live-fire exercise, Sarah was paired with a Marine Scout sniper named Corporal Jake Henderson. Henderson had initially been skeptical about working with someone from outside the Marine Corps, especially someone without combat experience, but he approached the partnership professionally. The exercise simulated a hostage rescue scenario in an urban environment. Sarah and Henderson had to infiltrate a mock city, establish overwatch positions, and provide precision fire support for an assault team. The targets were small, the shooting positions were awkward, and there were strict rules about avoiding simulated civilian casualties. Sarah's performance during the exercise was flawless. She adapted quickly to the unfamiliar urban environment, identified optimal shooting positions, and made accurate shots under pressure. Henderson, initially skeptical, found himself impressed by her tactical awareness and shooting skills. "You definitely know what you're doing," Henderson told her after the exercise. "I've worked with snipers who could shoot well from a prepared position but struggled when things got complicated. You handled those awkward angles and tight time frames like someone with years of experience." As Sarah's training progressed, she began to understand the broader context of what she was learning. The joint facility wasn't just about improving individual skills. It was about preparing soldiers for the most sensitive and dangerous missions that the military might face. The level of responsibility was enormous, and the consequences of failure could be catastrophic. One training scenario particularly challenged Sarah's decision-making abilities. She was positioned as overwatch for a simulated operation to capture a high-value target in a compound. During the exercise, the situation became complicated when civilian role-players entered the area, creating a complex environment where any shot had to be carefully considered. The scenario required Sarah to make split-second decisions about when to engage and when to hold fire. The margin for error was zero, and the pressure was intense. Sarah's training and natural judgment served her well, and she successfully engaged appropriate targets while avoiding any simulated civilian casualties. Major Lisa Thompson, who had been observing the exercise, was impressed by Sarah's performance under pressure. Thompson was a military intelligence officer who specialized in evaluating personnel for sensitive assignments. "Sergeant Martinez," Thompson said during the debrief, "technical shooting skills are only part of what we look for in personnel for special operations support. Judgment, adaptability, and the ability to operate effectively under extreme stress are equally important. You've demonstrated all of these qualities." Sarah's reputation at the joint facility grew steadily. Other trainees began seeking her advice on shooting techniques, and instructors started using her performance as an example of how to approach complex scenarios. But with recognition came increased expectations and scrutiny. The facility's commander, Colonel Patricia Hayes, decided to observe Sarah's training personally. Hayes was responsible for recommending personnel for the military's most classified operations, and she had heard multiple reports about Sarah's exceptional abilities. During a particularly challenging exercise involving multiple long-range targets, in difficult terrain, Hayes watched as Sarah methodically engaged each target with precision that impressed even the veteran special operations personnel present. "I've been in the military for over 20 years, Hayes told her training supervisors, "and I've rarely seen someone combine technical excellence with tactical awareness the way Sergeant Martinez does. She's not just a great shooter, she's a complete operator." This observation would prove to be more significant than Sarah realized at the time. Hayes was in the process of assembling a team for a classified mission that would require the absolute best personnel available. Sarah's name was already on her list of candidates. As Sarah's training neared completion, she received an unexpected visitor. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who had evaluated her months earlier, arrived at the facility for a meeting with Sarah and her training supervisors. "Sergeant Martinez," Rodriguez told her, "your performance here has exceeded everyone's expectations. There are opportunities becoming available that would put your skills to use in ways that could make a real difference. Are you interested in assignments that would involve significant risks but also significant impact?" Sarah understood that Rodriguez was talking about combat deployments and classified operations. This was what she had trained for, and despite the risks involved, she was eager to put her skills to use in service of her country. "I enlisted to serve," Sarah replied. "If my abilities can contribute to important missions, then that's where I want to be." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Good answer. There are some people you need to meet." The stage was set for Sarah to move. Beyond training and into operational assignments that would test everything she had learned and challenge her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the military training ground as Sarah Martinez adjusted her position behind the Barrett .50 caliber rifle. Sweat dripped from her forehead, but her hands remained steady. At 24 years old, she had already earned a reputation as one of the most skilled marksmen in the entire U.S. Army. But today was different. Today she was attempting something that only a handful of snipers in military history had ever achieved. The target stood 200 meters away, more than 2 miles in the distance. At that range, the bullet would take nearly 4 seconds to reach its destination, and the slightest miscalculation could send it hundreds of feet off course. Wind, humidity, temperature, and even the rotation of the Earth itself would affect the shot. Sarah had spent months preparing for this moment, studying ballistics tables, practicing breathing techniques, and calculating variables that most people couldn't even comprehend. Growing up in a small town in Texas, Sarah had learned to shoot from her grandfather, a World War II veteran who taught her that shooting wasn't just about pulling a trigger. It was about patience, discipline, and respect for the weapon. Her father had been skeptical when she announced her intention to join the Army, worried that his daughter would struggle in a male-dominated environment. But Sarah had always been determined to prove that gender meant nothing when it came to skill and dedication. The military training facility buzzed with activity around her. Other soldiers went through their daily routines, practicing formations, cleaning weapons, and attending briefings. But Sarah's world had narrowed to just her rifle, and that distant target. The Barrett .50 was a massive weapon, weighing over 30 pounds and capable of stopping vehicles or penetrating light armor. In the right hands, it was one of the most precise long-range weapons ever created. Colonel James Morrison, the base commander, had initially been reluctant to allow Sarah to attempt the 200-meter shot. The ammunition was expensive, the range time was valuable, and frankly, very few people believed she could make it. But Sarah's previous achievements had earned her the opportunity. She held the base record for accuracy at 1,500 meters and had never missed a qualifying shot in her 3 years of service. The spotting team radioed wind conditions as Sarah made her final adjustments. The crosshairs in her scope seemed impossibly small against the distant target. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate, entering the meditative state that all great snipers knew. The world around her faded away, the sounds of the base, the heat of the sun, the weight of expectations. There was only the shot. 3 other soldiers had attempted this distance in the past year. All had failed. The physics were brutal at this range. The bullet would drop over 400 feet during its flight, affected by wind currents at multiple altitudes. Even with the most advanced ballistic computers, there were variables that couldn't be perfectly calculated. Experience, instinct, and a touch of luck all played their parts. Sarah's finger found the trigger. She had fired thousands of rounds in training, but this one felt different. This shot would either cement her reputation as an extraordinary marksman or serve as a humbling reminder of the limits of human capability. The rifle's scope had been zeroed and re-zeroed multiple times. The ammunition had been hand-selected for consistency. Everything that could be controlled had been controlled. The spotting team confirmed the target was clear. The range was hot. Sarah took one final breath, held it halfway, and began the slow, steady pressure on the trigger that she had practiced countless times. The Barrett .50 fired with a tremendous boom that echoed across the desert. The recoil, even with the rifle's muzzle brake, pushed back against her shoulder with tremendous force. For nearly 4 seconds, the world held its breath. The bullet traveled at over 2,800 feet per second, but at this distance it seemed to take forever. Sarah maintained her position, watching through her scope as the spotting team confirmed the impact. The radio crackled to life. Target hit. Center. Mass. Confirmed 3 200-meter shot successful. A cheer went up from the small group of observers who had gathered to watch. Sarah allowed herself a small smile but remained focused. One successful shot wasn't enough for the record. Military regulations required 3 consecutive hits at this distance for official recognition. She had just completed 1/3 of the challenge, As she prepared for the second shot, word of her initial success began to spread throughout the base. Soldiers started gathering at the observation area. Some came out of curiosity, others out of respect for what they were witnessing. A 3,200-meter confirmed kill shot was the stuff of legend, and they were watching history in the making. The second shot required the same meticulous preparation. Sarah adjusted for the slight wind shift that had occurred in the minutes since. Her first shot. The target, though damaged from the first impact, was still viable for scoring. She settled into position again, controlling her breathing, focusing her mind. The second shot rang out across the desert. Another 4-second eternity followed. The spotting team confirmed another hit. 2 down, 1 to go. By now, nearly 50 soldiers had gathered to watch. Among them were some of the base's most experienced marksmen, men who understood exactly how difficult what Sarah was attempting really was. They watched in respectful silence as she prepared for the final shot that would make military history. The pressure was immense, but Sarah had trained for pressure. In combat situations, there often wouldn't be second chances. The lives of fellow soldiers might depend on a single perfect shot. This was training for those moments when everything mattered. She chambered the final round. The desert had grown quiet except for the distant hum of vehicles and the occasional radio chatter from the spotting team. Sarah's grandfather had always told her that the most important shot was the one you were about to take. The previous shots, good or bad, were history. Only the present moment mattered. The third shot would determine whether she would join the elite group of military snipers who had achieved confirmed kills at extreme distances. Her name would go into the record books, but more importantly, she would prove that skill, determination, and dedication were more important than any preconceived notions about who could excel in military service. Sarah took her position one final time, the weight of history and expectation resting on her shoulders like the desert heat. 6 weeks later, Sarah found herself on a military transport aircraft flying toward a destination she wasn't allowed to know until after takeoff. Her gear had been packed according to specifications she had never seen before, and her briefings had been conducted by intelligence officers she didn't recognize. Everything about this assignment was different from her previous military experience. The mission briefing revealed that Sarah would be operating in a hostile region where American forces were conducting counterterrorism operations. Her role would be to provide precision overwatch for special operations teams targeting high-value individuals who posed direct threats to American interests and civilian populations. The team leader was Major David Kim, a Special Forces officer with extensive combat experience. Kim had specifically requested Sarah for the mission after reviewing her training records and speaking with her instructors at the joint facility. Sergeant Martinez, Kim explained during the final briefing, this operation requires someone who can make extremely precise shots in challenging conditions. The targets we're dealing with are dangerous individuals who won't hesitate to use civilian populations as shields. Your job is to provide options for engagement when traditional assault methods aren't feasible. Sarah understood the gravity of what she was being asked to do. These wouldn't be training targets or test scenarios. The shots she fired could mean the difference between mission success and failure, between saving innocent lives and allowing dangerous individuals to escape. The deployment location was a mountainous region where terrorist organizations had established hidden camps and safe houses. The terrain was brutal, with extreme elevation changes, unpredictable weather, and limited visibility caused by frequent fog and dust storms. It was exactly the kind of environment where precision shooting became extraordinarily difficult. Sarah's first mission came just 3 days after arriving in country. Intelligence sources had identified a compound where a terrorist leader responsible for multiple attacks against civilian targets was believed to be hiding. The compound was heavily fortified and surrounded by potential civilian structures, making a direct assault extremely risky. Sarah's position was on a ridge approximately 1,800 meters from the target compound. The distance was well within her capabilities, but the environmental conditions were challenging. Wind speeds were variable, the target was partially concealed, and there were strict rules of engagement designed to minimize any risk to non-combatants. The mission required patience that tested even Sarah's exceptional discipline. For over 6 hours, she maintained her position, monitoring the compound through her scope, waiting for a clear opportunity to identify and engage the target. During this time, several individuals moved in and out of the compound, but none matched the description of the primary target. Finally, late in the afternoon, intelligence confirmed that the target had been identified moving within the compound. Sarah adjusted her position and began the careful process of calculating the shot. The target appeared briefly in an open area, but the window of opportunity lasted only seconds before he moved back into cover. "Overwatch, this is command," came the radio transmission. "Target confirmed. You have authorization to engage when opportunity presents." Sarah acknowledged the transmission and continued her patient observation. She understood that rushing the shot would be worse than missing the opportunity entirely. The target's pattern of movement suggested he would appear in the open area again, but there was no way to predict when. 20 minutes later, the target emerged from cover again. This time, Sarah was ready. The environmental conditions were as good as they were likely to get. The target was clearly identified and no civilian personnel were in the engagement area. Sarah took the shot. The 1-800-meter engagement was successful. The target was neutralized and the threat he represented to civilian populations was eliminated. Sarah's first combat shot had achieved its objective, but she felt no sense of celebration. She understood the serious nature of what had just occurred and the responsibility that came with her role. The mission's success led to additional assignments of increasing complexity. Sarah found herself working with different special operations teams, providing overwatch for various types of operations in challenging environments. Each mission presented unique difficulties and required her to adapt her techniques to new situations. During one particularly challenging operation, Sarah was required to provide support for a hostage rescue mission in an urban environment. The hostages were being held in a building surrounded by other structures, and the rescue team needed precision fire to neutralize guards without risking harm to the captives. The shooting positions available to Sarah were far from ideal. She had to fire from an unstable platform through narrow openings at targets that appeared only briefly. The margin for error was essentially zero, as any missed shot could endanger the hostages or compromise the rescue operation. Sarah successfully engaged multiple targets during the operation, allowing the rescue team to safely extract all hostages. The mission was considered a complete success, and Sarah's contribution was specifically noted in the after-action reports. Her reputation within the special operations community grew rapidly. Team leaders began specifically requesting her for their most challenging missions, and her name became known among personnel who specialized in high-risk operations. But success in combat operations brought its own challenges. Sarah found herself dealing with the psychological pressure of knowing that lives depended on her performance. The weight of responsibility was enormous, and she began to understand why so few people were selected for this type of work. During a brief rest period between deployments, Sarah received a letter from her grandfather. He had been told only that she was serving overseas in an important capacity, but his letter showed that he understood the serious nature of her work. "I know I taught you to shoot when you were young," his letter said, "but I also taught you about responsibility and doing what's right. Trust your training, trust your judgment, and remember that the skills you have are meant to protect people who can't protect themselves." The letter provided Sarah with the perspective she needed to continue her work. She was using her exceptional abilities to serve a purpose larger than herself, and that purpose gave meaning to the dangers and difficulties she faced. As her deployment continued, Sarah began to understand that her role extended beyond just being an exceptional marksman. She was part of a team of professionals who took on the missions that others couldn't handle, and her contribution was helping to protect innocent people from those who would do them harm. The experience was changing her in ways she was only beginning to recognize, preparing her for challenges that would test not just her shooting skills, but her character and her commitment to the values that had brought her to military service in the first place. After 18 months of continuous deployments and successful operations, Sarah had become one of the most sought-after precision marksmen in the military's special operations community. Her record was flawless: dozens of successful engagements, 0 civilian casualties, and multiple commendations for exceptional performance under pressure. But success at this level came with a price that was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. The psychological toll of combat operations was something that no amount of training could fully prepare someone to handle. Sarah found herself dealing with the accumulated stress of knowing that split-second decisions could mean the difference between life and death for both targets and innocent bystanders. Sleep became difficult, and she began experiencing the hypervigilance that affected many combat veterans. Recognition of her exceptional service came in an unexpected form. Sarah received orders to report to a military base in the United States for what was described only as a special assignment involving senior leadership evaluation. She had no idea what this meant, but the classification level of the orders suggested it was significant. The base she reported to was one she had never seen before, smaller than most installations but clearly important based on the security measures in place. Upon arrival, she was escorted to a briefing room where she met Colonel Hayes, who had observed her training at the joint facility months earlier. "Sergeant Martinez," Colonel Hayes began, "you're here because of a unique opportunity. There's going to be an inspection of this facility by very senior military leadership, including a 3-star general who oversees special operations across multiple theaters. This general has specifically requested to meet personnel who represent the highest levels of capability and professionalism in their specialties." Sarah was puzzled by the purpose of this meeting. She had assumed she would be returning to operational deployment, not participating in ceremonial functions or leadership meetings. Hayes continued, "General Patricia Morrison is known for her hands-on approach to understanding the capabilities of the personnel under her command. She doesn't just read reports. She wants to see firsthand what our soldiers can do. You'll be participating in a demonstration of precision marksmanship capabilities." The demonstration was scheduled for the following week, giving Sarah time to familiarize herself with the base's shooting facilities and prepare her equipment. The Barrett .50 rifle she would be using was similar to the one she had used for her record-breaking shots, but she wanted to ensure everything was perfectly calibrated. During her preparation time, Sarah learned more about General Morrison from other personnel at the base. Morrison was known as a demanding leader who expected excellence from everyone in her command. She had risen through the ranks during a time when very few women reached senior leadership positions in combat-related fields, and she had a reputation for supporting capable personnel regardless of their background. The day of the demonstration arrived with perfect weather conditions. The shooting range had been set up with targets at various distances, including one at 3,200 meters that would showcase the achievement that had started Sarah's journey toward special operations. Sarah arrived at the range early to conduct final equipment checks and review her shooting data. The Barrett .50 was functioning perfectly, her ammunition was consistent, and the environmental conditions were ideal for precision shooting. General Morrison arrived with a small group of senior officers, including several colonels and a brigadier general. Sarah had never been in the presence of such high-ranking leadership, but she focused on treating this like any other shooting demonstration. "General Morrison," Colonel Hayes announced, "I'd like you to meet Sergeant Sarah Martinez, the soldier who holds the current record for confirmed precision shots at 3,200 meters." General Morrison was an impressive figure, with the bearing and confidence that came from decades of military leadership. She was probably in her early 50s, with graying hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without requiring raised voices or dramatic gestures. "Sergeant Martinez," the general said, extending her hand for a firm handshake, "I've read your file, and I have to say your achievements are remarkable. I understand you're going to show us what precision marksmanship looks like at the highest level." Sarah responded with appropriate military courtesy, but she was struck by the general's direct and professional manner. There was no condescension or surprise about her age or gender, just straightforward acknowledgement of her capabilities. The demonstration began with shots at progressively increasing distances. Sarah started at 800 meters, then moved to 1,200, 2,600, and finally 2,000 meters. Each shot was perfect, hitting the center of the target with precision that impressed even the experienced military leadership present. "Impressive," General Morrison commented after observing the 2,000-meter shot. "But I understand your real specialty is at extreme distances. Is that correct?" Sarah confirmed that her record was at 3,200 meters, and the general requested that she attempt that shot for the demonstration. Sarah was happy to comply, understanding that this was what she had been brought here to demonstrate. The 3,200-meter target was set up, and Sarah began her methodical preparation. She checked wind conditions, calculated ballistic data, and adjusted her scope with the same careful attention to detail that had made her successful in combat operations. General Morrison and the other officers moved to an observation position, where they could watch both Sarah's shooting position and the distant target through spotting scopes. The general was particularly interested in Sarah's preparation routine, asking detailed questions about her calculations and decision-making process. Sarah settled into her firing position behind the Barrett 50. The familiar weight of the rifle, the precision of the scope, and the discipline of controlled breathing brought her into the focused state that had become second nature during her military career. The shot rang out across the range, and the officers watched through their spotting equipment as the bullet traveled the incredible distance to the target. The spotting team confirmed a center hit, and Sarah could see the impressed reactions of the senior leadership. But General Morrison wasn't finished. "Sergeant, can you do that 2 more times? I want to see if that was skill or luck." Sarah smiled, slightly, and prepared for the second shot. This was exactly what she had expected from a general with Morrison's reputation. The second shot was another center hit, followed by a third that completed the demonstration with perfect results. General Morrison walked over to where Sarah was securing her rifle after the demonstration. The conversation that followed would change Sarah's understanding of her career trajectory and the opportunities that exceptional performance could create. General Morrison approached Sarah as she finished securing the Barrett 50 after the demonstration. The other senior officers maintained a respectful distance, understanding that the general wanted a private conversation with the young sergeant, who had just delivered a flawless performance. "Sergeant Martinez," the general began, "I've been in the military for over 30 years and I've seen a lot of exceptional soldiers. But what I just witnessed goes beyond exceptional. That level of precision, combined with the composure you showed under observation, tells me something about your character that's even more impressive than your shooting ability." Sarah stood at attention, uncertain about how to respond to such direct praise from someone of General Morrison's rank and reputation. She had learned during her deployments that senior leadership often had purposes beyond what was immediately apparent in their conversations. "I've been reviewing your operational record," the general continued. 18 months of flawless performance. In high-stress situations, 0 incidents, multiple successful missions that directly saved civilian lives. That's the kind of track record that gets attention at the highest levels of military command. General Morrison paused and looked directly at Sarah. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to give me an honest answer, not what you think I want to hear. Are you interested in opportunities that would use your skills in ways that could have strategic impact on military operations?" Sarah understood that the general was talking about assignments that went beyond even the special operations work she had been doing. The term strategic impact suggested involvement in missions that could affect policy, international relations, or national security at the highest levels. "General, I enlisted to serve my country in whatever capacity my abilities allow," Sarah replied. "If there are missions where my skills can make a meaningful difference, then that's where I want to be." General Morrison nodded approvingly. "Good answer. Let me tell you about something that's being developed. There's a new program that combines advanced training with cutting-edge technology to create capabilities that didn't exist before. The soldiers selected for this program would be operating in situations where conventional military approaches aren't feasible." Sarah listened intently as the general described a program that sounded like something from science fiction. Advanced optics, experimental ammunition, communication systems that allowed real-time coordination with intelligence assets, and missions that required operating independently in hostile territory for extended periods. "The selection process for this program is extremely rigorous," General Morrison explained. "Physical standards, psychological evaluation, security clearance requirements, and technical training that would take over a year to complete. Most importantly,